Hi everybody, Gary Francione for the Abolitionist Approach. What do you do when you're engaged in vegan advocacy, either talking with someone one-on-one or with a group, and someone says, you know what, I agree with you, you're right. It's wrong to exploit non-human animals. Veganism is a moral baseline. It's a moral imperative. And I want to go vegan, but I can't. I can't go vegan overnight because it's just too difficult and it's just too overwhelming and I don't know what to do and I don't know where to start and it's just too hard. Now, we shouldn't be surprised that we get that sort of reaction because the large animal welfare groups have done an excellent job of convincing people that they can do everything but go vegan in order to satisfy their moral obligations to animals, and that going vegan is only for the strongest of the strong. So it's really imperative when you get a reaction like that that you emphasize to the person who's saying that to you how easy it is to go vegan, because it is very easy. It's important to emphasize that people are already eating fruits and vegetables and grains and beans and seeds. They just have to eat more of those things and get rid of the meat, the dairy, the eggs, the honey, whatever, and they can transition very easily overnight to a vegan diet. And so, but it's really important, and that's the main thing. I mean, obviously being a vegan is not just what you eat, it's what you eat, what you wear, what you use. But the most difficult thing for people is the vegan diet. Once, as I say many times, once your diet changes and you make the decision, the ethical decision to no longer consume animal products, everything changes. And until you make that decision, basically nothing changes. So when you're focusing on the vegan diet, emphasize how easy it is. We have a website, howdoigovegan.com. And it gives you all sorts of information, and it gives you recipes, and it gives you nutritional information and links to the governmental and professional organizations so that people have a resource that a free resource that they can get all the information that they need. And the internet has an unlimited supply of vegan recipes, from the very simple and the extremely cheap to the more elaborate, but all sorts of things. It's very, very easy. Going vegan overnight is one of the easiest things you can do in terms of morality, in terms of stopping the violation of fundamental rights. It's one of the easiest things that you can do. And that's what's really important for abolitionists to do, is to educate people not only about the fact that veganism is a moral baseline, but how easy it is for people to be vegan. Okay? And how easy it is for people to have a vegan diet. It's extremely important that we educate people about that. Now, what do you do in a situation where someone says, you know what, I'm hearing what you're saying and I agree with you, but it's just, it's a psychological thing. I'm just too anxious about, I just can't do this overnight. It's just too overwhelming. And I'm not going to do it overnight. So I'm just telling you that right now, I'm not going to do it overnight. It's too difficult. Well, again, I come back and say, no, it's not difficult. Why do you find it difficult? Let's talk about that. But if somebody says, look, I'm not going to do it. I need an alternative way of doing this. One thing I've tried with some success over the years is to say, all right, fine. Then do it in stages. Eat plant-based foods only for breakfast. Eat plant-based foods only for lunch, for some period of time. So, you have plant-based foods only for breakfast for a week, and then plant-based foods only for lunch for a week, and then plant-based foods for dinner for a week. And you see as you go through each stage that you don't go blind, your arms and legs don't fall off. Everything's fine. There's nothing to be frightened of. And then at the end of that period, you have a plant-based diet. Okay? Now, if you're going to do this, when I do this with folks, I always say, let me be clear. I think it's easy for you to go vegan. If you're really taking this seriously morally, you can do this overnight. You can go vegan immediately in terms of your diet, and then the other issues are the clothing issues and the personal care issues are even easier. But you can do this overnight. But if you're not willing to do it, then, and if this is frightening to you, if you're actually frightened or anxious about going, adopting a vegan diet overnight, then do it this way. Eat plant-based foods only for breakfast for a week, and then for lunch for a week, and then for dinner for a week. However, keep in mind that you have acknowledged that you agree that you're violating the fundamental rights of animals if you continue to eat animal foods or exploit animals. And so every meal that you have where you're still eating animal foods is a violation of the fundamental rights of animals. You're engaging in activity that you recognize as immoral, and you're doing it deliberately. That raises, if you take morality seriously, this raises some serious problems. And so I always tell folks, if this is what you decide to do, please understand, I'm not putting any stamp of approval on this. As a matter of fact, it's wrong for you to do. If this is the only way you can do it, and I don't think it is, I think you can do this overnight, it's easy. But if you won't do that, if you refuse to do that, but you want to go vegan, this is an option for you, where you do this for a very, very limited period of time. And you do it in order to deal with your anxiety about going into a plant-based diet. I never promote the welfareist journey issue, the journey idea, or, we'll just reduce your intake and that's fine, and do meatless Monday. Those are all devices, or those are all approaches which reject the notion of veganism as a moral baseline. They basically focus on supposedly reducing suffering, but they do not recognize, the whole idea of the journey, or of eating happy foods, happy meat and happy dairy and stuff. Those are all approaches that deny veganism as a moral baseline. Those are all approaches where people are basically saying, the welfarists are basically saying, you can continue to exploit animals and still discharge your moral obligations to animals. The answer is no, you can't. If you're exploiting animals, you're not discharging your moral obligations to animals. You're treating them as commodities. You're treating them as things. So I think we have to be very, very clear that, if someone says, I think it's difficult to go vegan, I can't go vegan overnight, the answer is yes, of course you can. And work with those people. Work with them. Put the time and the effort in. If they really believe that it's wrong to exploit non-human animals, then work with them and spend the time you need to spend to convince them, to show them how easy it is to adopt a vegan diet and then do the other things as well. But take the time to educate them. If they absolutely refuse, if they say, look, I just can't do it, I'm frightened, I'm anxious, well, this is an option, but you've got to always be clear. Never, ever, ever put a stamp of approval on animal exploitation, and always make it clear that veganism is a moral imperative, to the extent that they go on one more minute as a non-vegan. They're engaging in animal exploitation, which they agree violates the fundamental rights of animals. So they ought to stop that, and they ought to take it seriously, and they ought to go vegan immediately. If they can't do it, and they want to do it in the 3 stages, fine. But always make clear that what they're doing raises serious moral issues based on what they say they believe. For more information, go to our website, howdoigovegan.com. Thank you very much for listening.